Oh, and the mics and everything. Oh, now we are.
There they go. Now they're
Half a step ahead. So yeah, welcome to our joint meeting, 4 p.m. Monday, September 29th, 2025. Yeah, want to do introductions or?
start around. You go.
Sure. Tony DeBone, Deschutes County Commissioner, and thanks for joining us.
Mayor Melanie Keebler, she, her.
Then City Councilor Megan Perkins, she, her.
Mr. Padilla.
Mike Riley, Ben City Councilor, he, him.
Megan Norris, Ben City Council, she, her.
Ben City Councilor Ariel Mendez, he, him.
Ben City Council Steve Platt, he, him.
Ben City Councilor Gina Franzosa, she, her.
Deschutes County Commissioner Phil Chang.
Nick Leland, County Administrator.
Great, thank you. Well, as I say, welcome everybody. So item number 2, after roll call, temporary safe stay area update. So this will be the majority of what we're probably going to be talking about today.
Staff coming up to present.
Yeah. Our partnership. City land and county land.
I think I'm sharing. I don't see anything on the screen.
Oh, there it goes.
Good evening, Board of Commissioners, City Council. My name is Matt Stewart with the Real Estate Facilities and Housing Director. And with me tonight is
I'm Eric Kropp, Deputy County Administrator.
And I'm Amy Fraley with the City of Bend.
sorry. All right, so tonight we want to provide you with an update on the temporary safe stay area up at Juniper Ridge. Our goal of this meeting is to provide that update and status on how we've been doing with the management and the implementation and discuss next steps. So we'll go over a brief overview, kind of summaries of the collaborative efforts that we've done over the last year together as both the council and the commissioners. The intent set out in those resolutions, the continued efforts that we've been making as staff to satisfy the resolution. We'll review the housing focused case management and the numbers that we see out there today. We'll talk about just what we've done for enforcement, the rules and regulations. We'll review some of those challenges, and then we'll talk about some next steps on whether we want to pursue the closure or extend the TSA beyond the date of December 31st, 2026. And then we'll open up for discussion.
Just as background, this really started a couple of years ago with a code enforcement complaint against both the city and the county for having activities on city and county-owned land that was not allowed by county code. At the time, we were looking at possibly relocating the people that were living at Juniper Ridge on the county side. And for a variety of reasons, staff and the board decided not to remove the people. Part of it was the China hat situation. The Forest Service sent a letter to the county and was concerned that if the area in Juniper Ridge was closed, that the people would relocate to China Hat. And as we all know, the Forest Service had a fuels reduction grant to implement. So that was one of the concerns. So there's a variety of reasons that the county allowed the people to remain there. And it really goes back to the summer of 2023, we started with sanitation stations on the county-owned property. And then it evolved into the TSSA. So the map on the screen shows the middle part, the temporary safe stay area with the hash marks. And then the pink figure on the right where it says closed to public, that's the city-owned land east of the railroad tracks. And the city closed that area a couple of months ago. And then the green portion on the map is county-owned land, and the area just west of the freeway or the highway was closed to, is really day use only. So the hash mark is a temporary safe stay area, and then the green figure at the bottom is city-owned land, and that area, there's a piece that was designated for personal property. Should somebody relocate and we have to store the personal property, that's the location there. So the TSSA, again, it started after the county had the sanitation stations, but it really started with discussion at a joint meeting about a year ago between the City Council and the Board of County Commissioners. Shortly after that meeting, or about a month later, the county adopted the joint resolution on October 23rd, and then October 29th, the City of Bend City Council adopted the resolution as well. Then in November of 2024, the City Council approved a resolution to create Homeless Services Grant Program. And those funds came both from the county and the city, and that kicked off the focused case management services at the TSSA. And then you can see in March of 2025, March of this year, the TSSA included that housing-focused case management. So that's a quick synopsis of the TSSA collaborative efforts. So the joint resolution that was approved by both the board and the City Council had the intent of the TSSA, and it's to mitigate and improve the health and safety risks associated with unmanaged camping. We know that there had been unmanaged camping or unsanctioned camping for years, and also to provide improved sanitation services and case management to try to facilitate people moving from the TSSA into the housing continuum. The intent was also to reduce the area by 50%. The area has been reduced by mainly because of wanting to protect the irrigation canals that are underground there, and we'll talk more about that. And then the TSSA resolution called for a full closure of the area on or before December of 2026. We all recognize that December is not the best time to close an area. So that's part of the discussion tonight, is if we want to get your thoughts on whether or not we move forward with that closure date. If so, we may want to move it up, or if there's support to extend it. That's the crux of the discussion today. In terms of efforts for the TSSA, I'd mentioned the hygiene stations. So that includes porta potties, drinkable water, hand washing stations. We also have security patrol, both on the city and the county-owned property. It's about 4 hours per day. Infrastructure protection, both the COID canal and the Swally canals are underground. Both irrigation districts expressed concerns about vehicles traveling over those underground canals, and they weren't constructed to withstand that vehicle load. So both the city and the county worked collaboratively with the irrigation districts to fortify the canals to prevent vehicles from driving over them. There's also been fuels and fire mitigation, both on the county-owned property and the city. For the county-owned property, it was reducing the fuels, and on the city property, and I'm not sure the status, but it was to put in a fuel break between the TSSA and neighboring and neighborhoods nearby. Also, I mentioned the housing-focused case management, and then also having rules and guidelines and enforcing those. So those are kind of the extent of the TSSA continued efforts.
Thank you. The level of engagement with the Houseless Services grant recipients has been much higher than we anticipated. When we originally came before the commissioners and council, we thought perhaps a fourth to a half of the people that were survival camping would participate. And this was based on our interaction with Low Barrier Shelter. So we've been very surprised that 241 unique individuals have worked with our community partners to both build rapport and engage in services. So that's good news. That's working. As you may recall, we had these grant service, that's the dashboard first. Sorry. I have a different one. So this is the August numbers for the TSSA dashboard, which you can find on the city dashboard for houseless services. And you can see that corresponding number there, which is 241. There were 569 service hours during the month of August for 95 people that were engaging. You will also notice that there weren't transitions to more permanent housing in the month, but we do not track people who were vacating for other reasons, and also people had passed away that month. So there were 15 less people at the TSSA during that time period, but where they exited to, we're unsure. And so that is not a number that we're tracking. And you can see here those recipients of grant dollars, including Central Oregon Villages. You may notice, and this is different from the stewardship presentation, that they've only expended about 2% of their grant award, but that is because they are utilizing other dollars that came in suddenly at the end of the previous fiscal year, but they're very confident that they will be able to fully expend. Companion Animal Medical Project, or CAMP, has been very active in the TSSA, as well as Mosaic Medical, REACH, and Shepherd's House. Neighbor Impact has played a critical role in doing case conferencing with all of the providers and also managing the data. The city does not keep client level information, and so we're very grateful for their partnership. They did also put in their first invoice during September. They're confident that they will spend down that $50,000. And so we had some conversations at council about where people need to go and who is actually at the TSSA. So as of last week, for the third week in a row, we've seen a decrease to 191 campers and 143 camps. 70 campers have active heat assessments, which are the housing equity assessment tool, which is used across our continuum to assess vulnerabilities and determine where people are placed in the coordinated entry process. The city-supported shelters across Bend are 95% occupied or utilized in the current fiscal year. This includes Franklin Avenue Shelter, which is at about 104%, and the Navigation Center is also at 100%. Right now, living out at the TSSA, we estimate that there is between 8 and 10 minor children with 5 or 6 families. So based on the information that we do have and anecdotally talking with some providers, we have guessed that about 25% of people would qualify for permanent supportive housing, that 25% may wish to access additional safe parking sites across our communities, that 25% perhaps would be interested in non-congregate shelter or a motel. I picked the 28-room motel because that is what Stepping Stone Shelter is. So it just seemed like an easy one. And 25% of people may wish to access a similar managed camp.
Amy,
Yes.
so 25% might overlap.
They could overlap. It is just anecdotally gathering information from the people that are providing service of what might be the right mix.
So one person may have said, I'd be open to another managed camp or going to non-congregate shelter or.
And I should say that the providers were really concerned about me bringing this information, because if you're asking people what they want and we don't have that available, it seems to compromise the conversation and trust. And so this is really just kind of a guess. Like, if we had to figure out how to allocate what limited resources we have, where could we put those dollars in the community to create housing?
Amy, while we're talking about it, can you tell me what percentage of folks would not be interested in any of the above?
I don't know. I think it's a circumstance where you can ask people where they want to go, but unless you tell them what the option is, unless that option is real, how can they really respond? People may say, I don't want to leave Juniper Ridge, but what we saw with permanent supportive housing was that people did want other opportunities. It's just hard to know.
Thank you.
So both council and the commission adopted rules and regulations for people that are camping at the TSSA that really, if you'll recall, this is based around ORS that specifies it has to be temporary vehicle camping. So they must have a vehicle to be within a designated area. They cannot construct things, no dumping of black water, causing injury to anyone, no open flames or fires. So they may have gas that they can use for cooking appliances, but that has to be 3 feet away from anything flammable, but nothing wood burning outside. discharging of firearms or any sort of storage or abandonment of vehicles. And then lastly, we're looking for order from animals and pets, so keeping on lease. We've implemented kind of a remedy and removal type system. So we issue people a notice of remedy that is essentially a notice for them that they are doing something that's in violation of the rules, and we wish for them to cure that remedy. If they are unable to cure that remedy, we issue them a removal notice. So just some examples of what a remedy would qualify for: noise or disruption, cooking with an open flame, failing to utilize the hygiene stations, dumping off-leash animal or pet, camping outside the boundary, or creating their own new structure, abandoning vehicles, or sleeping in tents. If they take that to the next step where they're violating those or have not curing those remedies, they are subject to removal. We began in June with education, trying to get an education effort to those who are there, understanding the rules and regulations, emphasizing compliance. So working with them closely on understanding what it is we're seeking. In August, we began issuing those notice of remedies. We've done 10 to date. And then early September, we did our first notice of removal. So we did remove 3 camps and about 6 individuals from those camps in September. As Amy mentioned, we have seen other people leave. We're not sure if that's in relation to the rules being more enforced, but we do anticipate that might be some of the items that we've seen why people are leaving. So some of the overall challenges with the TSSA, population has been the biggest. When we first started this, we had about 100 to 120 people that we estimated would be within the TSSA. With the closure of China Hat, along with the Cabin Butte project, we've seen that number go up over 100. At one point, about a month ago, we had about 230 people. As of last count, as Amy mentioned, we're at 191. So we do see fluctuation. Rules, compliance, and enforcement with staffing levels and the number of people, it's been tough for us to maintain enforcement and getting enough people out there to maintain that enforcement, as well as to issue all those notices and keep people in compliance along with the education. The management costs overall, so I'll allow Eric here in a minute to kind of break down for the county, but city councilors have seen our breakdown as part of the last city council session a couple weeks ago. But together, between fiscal year 24 and 25, we've spent combined about $1 million, and that's for the TSSA hygiene stations, security, trash, closure and cleanup of the east side. So about 300,000 of that is dedicated strictly for the city closing the east side of the railroad tracks, staffing management, and just general enforcement. And then obviously housing and shelter options. So lack of housing, shelters, safe parking, or other transitional opportunities. And that includes affordable housing, which I won't get too much in, but both boards should be seeing some examples of affordable housing projects coming forward, looking for some tax exemptions in the coming weeks. All that goes along to us trying to provide opportunities for people to move into and create other affordable housing options.
The next slide details the county's expenses. So the columns show each fiscal year, and then the rows break it down by category. So the first category is water. The total spent there is about $64,000. Next is portable toilets and hand washing stations, about $40,000. Next is dumpsters, about $20,000. Security, $128,000. So that's the second largest category. General cleanup, about $250,000. And then miscellaneous, which includes fire gates, eco blocks, fire extinguishers. So the total over the last couple fiscal years is about $600,000. And of that $600,000, about $250,000 has been general cleanup. And then the next largest category is security at $128,000.
The general cleanup, just like trash cleanup, or is that some of the clearing for fire?
No, more the trash cleanup. Yeah, if there's a camp that is burned out or clearly abandoned, those are significant costs.
So highlighting next steps. If we stay within accordance with the resolution that was adopted by both parties or both jurisdictions, we need to increase our compliance and enforcement efforts. Remove those individuals in the camps that do not remedy or comply with the rules and regulations. Want to continue to support efforts for safer shelter and or housing to increase the number of successful exits or transitions, and then coordinate a closure plan for the area on or before December of 2026. So conceptually, what that might look like in terms of a closure, we probably, as Eric mentioned earlier, look for a closure around October or November of 2026. That also allows for any accommodation, any kind of hangover that may occur into December of 2026. We'd want to phase that closure just due to staffing and our ability to be able to close down certain sections, but be able to do this methodically. So we'd probably start with a closure of each section every 60 to 90 days, beginning in May. We would start kind of at the north, so in and around CID's property with section 1 and 2, and relocate people to the west side of the COD canal and south of that hydro facility, which is sections 3 and 4. If we wanted to look to extend the TSSA beyond December of 2026, our recommendation would be to reduce the TSA by 50%. So again, executing a closure of sections 1 and 2 that are in and around the CID hydro facility. We'd probably begin that in March, look to complete that in July, and we'd allow those individuals who are on sections 1 and 2 be able to relocate to sections 3 and 4 until we fully close the area. So tonight, if we did want to look to extend, we'd be asking this group how long you possibly would like to put that extension for. And with that, we'll open it for any discussion or questions.
You've only removed 3 of them. What about the other 7? Are they going to be removed?
They're issued remedy notices and they've been complying with those remedy notices. Yeah, they're okay. Yeah. Yes, we do see people responding.
And
So this is
I'm sorry.
I was just going to acknowledge it's a joint meeting, maybe a little different protocol about who speaks, we may be jumping in or raising hands. So let's just take a moment and watch the flow, but please.
I just wanted to add to Matt's explanation. Once there is a notice to remedy, the providers are also noticed, so they can go out and work with their clients very closely to address the concerns of the city and the county.
And then Mayor.
Thank you. Highlight that had a discussion and a similar presentation to us a couple of weeks ago, and generally was expressing concern for a closure as to where folks are going. We also had the opportunity, I wanted to relay the information from Stacey Woody, who's one of the service providers out there, to just give us a slice of what she has seen. And she echoes that there is really good engagement, that there's also really good coordination between all these service providers that do different things, which is really working pretty well. And that these folks out there are not the type of folks you can kind of hand an apartment key to necessarily. Some of them maybe, but a lot of them, as we saw in that sort of estimated, what do they need a lot more than that. So I think we heard a lot of information about how this is working well at the moment, as well as we heard concerns and we all received a letter from COID as well around the activities around their canal in that area too. So I just want to make sure we pass that information into this discussion. Generally on council, there was an appetite to look at an extended concept versus closing this next year, but we're here to have more discussion with our county partners on that.
Great. Anybody else ready right now? Yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you. We often hear about the cost of providing services to people who are experiencing houselessness, and we received a letter from former Bend police chief that notes that this type of displacement, if the temporary safe stay area were to completely be closed or even shrink significantly, he says significantly increases the calls for service of our public safety team. These highly trained and motivated officers, firefighters, and paramedics are some of the highest paid of city staff. So has anybody tried to provide some kind of estimate in terms of just looking at the cost of what the alternative or what the impact of closing or shrinking this area is? I'm just trying to get a sense of, we have limited budgets, obviously, and if we're looking at continuing to fund or finding additional funding sources, is there any way to kind of assess what the alternative is?
Get started. I think from a cost perspective, we can look at what the alternatives if we are to house them. So we kind of know what the cost of a motel is to purchase and what by room that would cost to operate. We do have ideas around what it would cost us to build more affordable housing and what that's kind of costing a community. So we can kind of ballpark those numbers. I think where Mr. Porter was getting at was the cost to our service providers who may have to go further out to address those situations. We haven't looked at it from that cost perspective, but I think the argument is we know where these folks are. We have them centrally located. The fuels mitigation work has proven somewhat successful when we look at the incidents that we've had around RV fires, our ability to respond, ability to put them out without any further incident. And I think that in itself has been a cost saving for us as a community. If we look at what the cost was when the mile marker fire occurred in 2024. But I couldn't tell you, I have an idea of what that might cost in terms of risks, in that perspective.
think, you know, I mean, I think I'm generally, I think with others who recognize that this is not an ideal situation and that we're doing the best we can and generally favor finding some kind of alternative arrangement before we look at closure. What that looks like is I think where I would like to have a larger conversation where we can then get a sense of what kind of costs would be required in terms of an alternative compared to, you know, continuing the current situation, which I think is unsustainable in the long term.
Amy and I off the top of our heads can quickly speak to at least Stepping Stone. I think we purchased that for around 3 million. We put about another 1 million into investment into that. And how much are we spending annually, I think, right now? Or how much are they receiving, I should say?
They COIC funded, and so 500 to 750,000.
To run and operate, and that's 28 rooms.
It's 56.
Just piggyback on that. The other day, it was a week or two ago at the Coordinated Homeless Response Office, we had a presentation from the National Vehicle Residency Collective. And what I thought was really profound about this presentation was oftentimes I feel like in this community, in the state of Oregon, shelter or housing structured around vehicle residency is thought of as kind of like, that's our last option. We don't want to do that. We would only consider doing that if like we can't produce enough indoor shelter or transitional housing for people. But in a lot of other regions of the country, these vehicle residency approaches are the first line of defense. You know, they're used as the first strategy. We heard about you know, the concept of a long-term visitor area has come up before in our discussions, but I don't think we've actually been talking about it the way that it actually is done. It does cost some resources. It does take some management. It's not just a free-for-all and people signing a piece of paper. But you know, in that area, Quartzsite, Quartzdale, Arizona, they you know, they are providing vehicle residency opportunities, housing opportunities for many hundreds of people at a modest cost to federal, state, and local jurisdictions. And so when we're talking about, well, what are our options? You know, what could we be doing instead of this? I think we need to think not just about, okay, what would it cost to put the same number of people in congregate shelter, but what would it cost to set up some kind of vehicle-based shelter system that is, you know, is managed, it's appropriately sited, it has you know, whatever minimal level of infrastructure is necessary to make it work. And it is very possible that that is going to cost less per person than it costs to put someone in congregate shelter or non-congregate shelter. You know, that then begs the question, well, where are we going to do that? Because that's what we've struggled to find in our community is sites to do a managed camp or something like this long-term visitor area. But I just want to, you know, chime in with that so that we can start thinking about our longer term options in a maybe a broader way.
So along those lines, it's always been about, you know, where's a place for people? You know, there's just this new dynamic. You know, we were designing community and society with houses and urban growth boundaries and private property, and then all of a sudden we have, you know, this other dynamic. I support working towards next year's initial concept, knowing that there's a cycle to this. You know, you commit to going through the winter, spring comes, then there's summertime, and then the fall. So we're generally looking at the end of next year, 2026. If we let it slip, it'll basically slip for another whole year. And as I say, I mean, this is just the concept of how I would come to that conclusion. We are in the spot of which law do we violate? You know, I mean, this is a very dangerous high-speed intersection up there. Land use doesn't authorize the activities that we're doing. We did sign an agreement and we're working together for this last year or two on this, but you know, that's where I go with this. Also the dollars, you know, we do need to come up with some other dynamic about how do we fund long-term or stabilize whatever we're going to do, you know, whatever we're going to do together there. So as I say, the transportation safety at that location is always been a big driver for me for, you know, wanting to take that step that we had committed to when we started this. Please.
So I guess the question to follow up on that is between now and your proposal to close this next year, what resources or places for people to go will be available? And what is the county doing to create more resources or somewhere for someone to go?
Well,
Because that was part of the discussion we had as council was
yeah.
there's some things maybe in the works, but there didn't seem anything that was going to be ready by the time we even start closure in March of next year. That would be that place we could tell people to go. So what's your perspective on that?
Well, as I say, and I mentioned this before, we need some, I would love some support by the governor, by the legislature on this. It's our state land use system maybe run to ground. We don't have options. The Oregon land use systems puts people in a city. Their urban growth boundary is where people go. And we hear it all the time and people advocate for it. Counties don't have a lot of options. It's either resource land or non-resource land. There's nowhere outside of a, you know, outside of the county, outside of the urban growth boundaries in the rural to say, oh yeah, let's choose this. So as I say, we are in a very tight spot, which is exciting. Our state land use system has put us at the knife's edge about the opportunities. I don't have opportunities. There's nothing to pull out of my pocket on this.
We'd like to add, unfortunately, that safe parking that is.
Commissioner Adair, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the red light is on your microphone.
Oh,
and-
there's just different colors.
Okay, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. I just
Yep,
want to
no,
make sure
thank you.
everyone can hear you.
There's a mixed set of mics. They're all on.
It's working.
Okay.
And the push button just puts it off for a moment if you have.
Pointed out to me this morning, they did tremendous work on bringing in safe parking, and yet the legislature has gone back and said, no, because they've cut back on the funding, they're not actually including safe parking. And to me, that's really, that's really quite tragic because it's effective. And to think that they're going back to the governor's original executive order. So Rick's scrambling right now in order to find funding. So
Amy, did you want to
Can
comment?
you clarify?
Yeah.
Yes, so for the current year, the allocations that were recently released, I believe it was on Friday evening from COIC, will focus on the shelters that have been set up. And then next year is when the sustainable shelter framework will go into place. Initially out of the gate, it's a reduction of around 6% across the state. And so they are without attrition, without another one of the shelters pulling out or reducing beds, there may not be enough dollars to do a higher barrier shelter. With the executive order and with the sustainable shelter plan that they'll put into place in the next year, there is a 30% set aside because safe parking is high barrier, but Bethlehem and those programs will be left out at this time until next year. I will say that COIC is continuing to work on that, and we have seen the definition of low barrier change with OHCS over the years back and forth. So I don't think that it's impossible that something else could come out, but yep, 1 year for them to put it in place.
Yeah, I would just like to kind of go back to when we first had these conversations about setting this up. And some people were at this table and some people weren't, but we talked about how this definitely wasn't going to be perfect, and that we were going to have to be nimble, right? And we were going to have to be making changes in order to have some success at managing a large group of people in a loose structure. And I mean, again, I just want to repeat the things. There are a lot of things here that are working. We have people that are following rules, and if they're not following rules, they're given the opportunity to remedy that, and if not, then they have to leave. There are numerous instances of fires that have been stopped, very quickly because of the fact that everybody knows where people are, and because of the incredible work that both the county and the city have done with to cut back on the trees and the dangerous fire situation there. And we have people that are exiting into stable housing and to some other environment that is more safe. And we have people that are engaging with our service providers. So we have people that we have a situation where it is starting to work. And my concern with us giving up on it is that then we have to start all over again somewhere else, because it is going to happen somewhere else. And it could happen on the streets of Bend. It could happen in the forests in Lapine. It could happen in Sisters. It could happen anywhere in our county. But there are 191 people here who are at risk of once again being moved and re-traumatized and having to start all over from scratch. And right here, I just want to reiterate, it says city-supported shelters are at 95% utilization for the current calendar year. There is literally no other place for them to go. And so as we have this conversation, I just want us to be aware of the fact that 191 people are not going to disappear on December 31st of 2026.
I can piggyback on that. I think, in addition to all the benefits that are clearly being provided to the people who are housed and living there, and the fact that we have a place that easier to provide services for people, we have more success in building relationships with people, providing services, and more people moving on. I think what concerns me the most is without anywhere else to go, that there were just, as Council Perkins referred to, we're sort of dispersing people again once out into our community. And we've heard a lot of feedback just over the last 3 or 4 days as counselors, and I don't think all of those emails included the commissioners about the concerns people have across the community about the impacts on businesses, about the impacts on increased fire risk, and the increase in neighborhoods potentially across the region, including in the city and in unincorporated areas in the county. And I just, without other places for it to go, we've got to figure out to that theme of being nimble and flexible, of how we can adapt to have a bit more time, I think, so that we can create some new solutions and have more places for people to go as we start to close the place. I mean, I think what's on the table is to already reduce it by approximately 50%, right? Sometime before winter starts, so roughly a year from now. And then keep another portion open for a longer period of time. And I think for all the reasons we've just talked about, it's really important that we put that on the table and look seriously.
So we've had it open now for 7 months since, if you start March 1st. Okay, I know I heard a fabulous story from Ryan Dunning, who works in our property management. And he was telling me the story how he actually had someone he helped, he's had them move on. How many other success stories do we have? Because, you know, our Veterans Village, it's been open for a couple of years now, but those are veterans that came in homeless, and we've actually had 40 of them move on to housing. And do we have any other success stories besides the one I heard from Ryan? I mean,
Well, I would say
because-
well, you're saying the comparison has been open for a couple of years and has had 40. And so the TSSA has been open for 6-7 months, and it's had 22, 26. Yeah, 26 people who have moved on. They have moved on to more permanent housing. The city does not keep client level information. We work with providers. And we'd love to have a provider provide more personal stories, but that's not something, I don't have people's names.
Well, I just, it just seems like 7 months, we should be making somewhat of a success. I
Well,
know-
proportionally with your
Not really.
comparison, it is. So if there's 26 people and you're comparing it to 40 over a couple of years, that seems, yeah.
No, I just want to hear some success, because I know it was up to like 228 the other day, and now you're telling me that it's 191.
It's 191 as of last Thursday, the report from Compass.
Okay.
I guess I'd like to offer, I very much don't like the.
There you go.
Hmm. That was weird. Is there a mic?
Maybe how close it is to devices or.
We need to move
Not
closer
logged
to you
in.
so it doesn't have to be picking up, so,
It's better now.
yeah.
It's still
Closer or
Go ahead.
further? Oh, gosh,
Don't
I don't- Okay, sounds a little echoey. Okay, I'd just like to offer that, I think fundamentally, I think the TSSA area is unsafe. In terms of access, in terms of providers being able to access it. you know, in order, I think, in order even for law enforcement to provide true safety for the folks who live there, who deserve to be protected as well. And so what I ultimately do want to hold us to the deadline that we established, that the previous council and the commission established. I think that's the word that we gave to the community. And I think it's incumbent upon us to stick to that word and develop ultimately a plan for how to transition everyone out safely. I don't think anyone who is saying that they want to close the TSSA at the end of 2026 just wants to put everybody back out on the streets or deeper in the forest or anything like that. I think we want to find humane places for people to go. We all know that it's hard to build buildings to house people, and you know, maybe not everyone wants to be in a building. And I really appreciate Commissioner Chang's suggestion, as well as many advocates in the community, for the long-term vehicle areas. I think those hold a lot of promise. And as far as where land is available to go, I haven't had a chance to discuss this with anyone else on council or at the city, but I know the city owns industrial land in the Juniper Ridge Urban Renewal area that is unutilized right now and could perhaps be committed for a certain period of time for a long-term vehicle area or a managed camp or something like that. There are roads and utilities in that area now, so it seems like it would make it a lot easier to serve. So yeah, so I'm glad that we're having this discussion, and I hope we can start to, I don't know, talk about solutions, or at least taking steps to having a plan.
Sure. Good question. Just to follow up, Councilor Frondosa. So I agree that there are multiple elements of the current situation that I think are objectionable or problematic. And my question is, do you think that in the alternative extended concept, where the area is reduced by 50%, that mitigates or addresses in some significant way some of those concerns? You know, if it's access because of the dangers of Highway 97, that's not going to go away. But if it's access for law enforcement or fire, or because of some, you know, topographical concerns, those could be mitigated.
I mean, some of them could be mitigated, but I mean, I was talking with a service provider today about how challenging it is. You know, it is survival camping, as Amy said. And, you know, in the wintertime when it's snowing and below freezing for an extended period of time, I personally have a hard time knowing that folks are out there trying to live and survive. So, you know, I would really encourage us to look at, you know, providing places with minimal services, minimal infrastructure, but closer to services, so folks can be safer. So I don't know that I would feel that it's a dramatic improvement by reducing the numbers by 50%.
Thank you.
The people that were living in Juniper Ridge were either living in Juniper Ridge or living in China Hat. So they were living through cold winters. And I don't think anyone here thinks that this is an ideal situation for anybody. I would once again reiterate that I think this is the best that we have right now, while we are trying to set up other things that can be a little bit more sustainable and a little bit safer. And I just also want to push back. I don't think service providers are saying that it's, I have not heard, and again, I would ask Amy, have you heard from service providers that they're, or Matt, that they're scared to go to Juniper Ridge? And I have not heard such things, but.
I think that at times there are concerns anytime
Yeah,
you have people
of course.
I wouldn't say that there is not a time where there hasn't been a concern expressed. But the overall response for the service providers that we work with is the value of the TSSA, and that it is, in their view, working towards moving people into more permanent housing.
So yeah, this is, we can put as much direction as we can to it tonight. As I say, it looks like we're already generally going to be split. Great discussion. You know, we're talking a little bit more than a year from now, or extending it after that. I mean, I want to support people that need help, that you know, are looking transition lives, whatever. But that, as I say, the safety of that location is what I struggle with.
Yeah. Go ahead, Phil. Go ahead.
So there's basically two questions here. I don't think anyone here is suggesting that we want the temporary safe stay area to be open in perpetuity. So everybody here wants, thinks that there is a better option out there. The question, the question number two, which is connected to question number one, how fast do we ramp this down, is where are people going to go? And how do we, how do we find the land? How do we resource that? How do we make it sustainable? And if we had more promising options or a more promising outlook in terms of sites, resources, things like that, I would be much more eager to move forward with closing the temporary safe stay area sooner. But I don't think we have really great options identified right now, either in terms of locations, and it's not, and in my opinion, it's not because of the state land use planning system, with emergency siting rules, making rural residential zone lands available to us, with the county having a safe parking ordinance that covers, up to, I believe it is a mile from the city of Bend. Land use isn't our real constraint here. The big constraint is, the landowners who are willing to work with us or partner with us. And number two, the resources. And to kind of go back to state shelter funding, my take on what we're hearing from the state is they did what they could to offer shelter funding, continuing shelter funding for this biennium. It is going to allow us to keep a whole lot of shelter that is currently in operation, continuing forward, right? It will not allow us to expand very much, which we very much need to do, but we shouldn't dismiss keeping the shelter that we already have going, that has done a huge amount for us in terms of being able to move people to more stable, long-term permanent housing. That has done a huge amount for us in terms of keeping our numbers from growing even more than they have in our point in time counts. So, I'm grateful. I'm glad for the continuing shelter funding that we have, and also recognizing that it's not going to help us necessarily with this next step with the TSSA, which is, in my opinion, doing something like setting up another managed camp in the Bend area. For that, we need to identify landowners who are willing to work with us, or identify lands within our own holdings that might be suitable, and we need to figure out a funding model, a sustainable funding model. The Quartzsite, Arizona example was very interesting because the people who stayed there pay, a couple bucks a day, and that covers almost all the costs of operating that long-term visitor area. And if we can figure out, I'm guessing we will need something with a little bit more infrastructure development, a little bit more management than that. But if we can figure out some kind of model where, people contribute something to the operation of the site where they're living, it doesn't have to be so much that they could be paying rent in an apartment somewhere, but if they could contribute a little bit, I think we can come up with a much more sustainably funded model than the TSSA, for example.
We did hear from one of the providers that there was some models that had worked in other areas where, the residents that were actually there, people that were camping, actually helped participate in the cleanup, which could reduce some of the costs as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I just want to point out, for folks who are thinking we can close this next year, I still haven't heard a viable solution that will be in place by the end of next year. And I just want to look at our real world examples. We have what's going on up in Redmond, and I think we can look at how long that's taken to come to fruition. It's getting close, but still not complete. We can look at the Gales property where there's been an idea there and it's still currently stuck in county rezoning and we don't know what the timeline is going to be on that. So I think by extending, and I would agree with reducing by 50%, I think that is the right thing to do. But by extending this, we are allowing ourselves more time to actually dive into one of these solutions. And because we're going to need a commitment, right? And it's not just throwing out pieces of land today. We actually need to figure out who would be providing and how we would pay for that. In the meantime, this is working, right? This is reducing the amount of people who are homeless in Juniper Ridge. This is keeping people more safe, right? There are success stories coming from Juniper Ridge. And I think we have to balance that with the risk because this isn't a perfect solution. But if we just say, close this and kind of wait for a perfect solution, we're just creating a bigger problem. And we are going to push people into other areas in the county. So I think that is why I support the extended concept, and we look into 2027 and say, how much longer can we keep this going for our service providers to have that access and to help people get out of this situation? I fully also think that this should not be a place, if we extend it, that we say, okay, everyone can still come in here. We're trying to help the folks who are there right now, right? So I want our resources to be emphasized on, those families with kids and those people that are out there right now that could be in a better situation. But I think I think it's irresponsible to just say, well, we said 26 and we'll just do it when we know what we know now about how many people came out there from China Hat, but what's going on with our state shelter funding and with these other solutions not online yet, that might be something that people could go to.
The other thing though that we really should, will know shortly is that the fact that some people actually leave here in the winter because they realize it's 7 times more deadly to be here in our environment in the winter. I mean, I've heard about someone who goes over to Lane County for the winter. So maybe we're going to see some impact from that, bringing it down even below the 190. I would think that, if we have a couple cold days, people will start realizing that it gets really cold here.
Yeah, when we strategized for closing the east side, that was exactly part of that. So we saw about a 50% reduction just by waiting for the winter to go through before we issued those closures. So we do see that fluctuation, especially when the winter comes around.
Thanks, Matt.
Just one point of clarification I'd like Matt to address, given the ownership of the city land and county land at Juniper Ridge, if we have each body having different timelines, that presents some challenges. If you could talk about that.
That was gonna be my next proposal.
Yeah, I think the biggest is access. So technically the legal access off of 97 is on county property. And then we have as part of our IGA joint agreement, we have that access in between each other's property and our IGA for sharing those services. So I do want to highlight that the county has the primary contracts for the hygiene station security. It's not an issue for the city to go do that, but our technical and legal access to 97 for our property does not exist. It would have to come through the county property. So that's just something as a joint body we think about as we approach this together.
What I would really like for us to do is if we could check COID. I believe they've been negotiating for a while. And if we could, city and county both provide some funding for that fencing that they have desperately asked it for, to protect their assets. I don't, I was told maybe you mentioned something like 30,000 or something that we needed to come up with.
Well, let's take that as kind of an action item. Probably just consensus though. Does everybody support that? City and county partnership with COID, some capital costs for fencing, making sure we're all on the same page.
I think we just want to.
Fencing going, can we clarify that?
Yeah, so there's currently an existing fencing that's sort of around the hydro station itself. This would be a larger perimeter that would encompass a bit more of their intake area and outtake area for the hydro station, as well as sort of refortify the gates and entry point. I just want to, as part of that consensus, just sort of acknowledge the number they're asking for, up to 30,000 each, if that's, okay, just want to clarify.
But is that's in addition to moving people so that they're not going to go over the canal anymore?
Yeah, I think as staff, we're still advocating for reduction. There's a choke point or sort of strategic point where access is, and that's right there in the map I was showing earlier. That is one way for the people to get from section 1 to 2 from the lower sections. That's the only place they can go. So our advocating for closing sections 1 and 2 and isolating people on 3 and 4 is that allows us a very simple way of cutting off that access to those areas, because it's very much a singular point of access.
How many people are in 1 and 2?
We have, I think there's about 90 that are in 1 or 2, 91. I'm sorry, I meant to put it on the map. 91, and then the rest are actually spread out between 3 and 4. I will say the vast majority that moved into section 1 ended up coming from China Hat. So we saw a lot more people move up from that.
Yeah, I would, I'm for those two things, one, co-investing in better new fencing for the COID hydro facility, and trying to get people to the other side of the canal so that there's not people driving over a pipe that was not intended to ever support vehicle traffic. But I'd also like to say that we received a letter from an attorney from COID, and I really do not want us to have that kind of a relationship with COID. I would much rather us have a partnership relationship in which all of these local government bodies are interested in reducing homelessness and making sure that the facilities that we have, managed camps, safe parking, whatever it is in places that have the least impacts to all of our constituents. So I would like to essentially sort of offer those things. I'd like to see us offer those two things to COID in a spirit of partnership, and ask for more coordination, collaboration with COID to problem solve. This is an entity that owns a lot of land, a lot of public land, local public land around the region. They are experiencing homeless, unauthorized homeless encampments on COID lands all over the place. And I'm sure that they're very concerned. I know that they're very concerned about that. It would be really nice to work with them to reduce homelessness overall, to have appropriate facilities in the best possible locations. And I actually think it's possible that some of those good locations may actually be COID land ownership. Maybe COID land ownership that's not sitting right on top of their canal or right next to their hydro station, but they own a substantial amount of land in East Redmond. There's still a little bit in Bend, and I know of 37 acres that sits immediately on the eastern boundary of Bend city limits that COID owns. So if we approach this if we approach this as an effort to establish proactive partnership, and seek contributions from COID, land or something else that is not impactful to them, they could be a very valuable and useful partner in helping us solve the problems that we need to solve.
I would want to second first couple of things you said, which is just look officially second up to $30,000 from each body to help with the fencing, and a commitment to reduce the camping in the 1 and 2 areas. And I think we should actually just do a show of hands and be transparent about this.
Question first about that. So if there's 91 people, I guess this goes to the 3 of you. What are service providers saying about, and what are you seeing out there, that how can that be done? Is there enough room in 3 and 4 in case all 91 move to 3 and 4 and don't exit Juniper Ridge? How would we go about doing that?
Yeah, I think the county on section 3, so the very southern half, there's been some camps that have left. So there are some available property down to the south. We'd want to work with county staff on how we allow people counting, because that's near the Swallow infrastructure. People are quite spread out, so there is the notion that it's not necessarily that there isn't enough space. It's just people are going to be closer to each other than perhaps they are used to. So that just adds to the risk when it comes to how do people interact with one another. I think we've all been camping before in large campgrounds, right? But pets, but at the same time, from a enforcement or just a monitoring standpoint, it's less area we have to cover. So our presence can kind of get around much easier, much quicker. Law enforcement response, it's obviously much more accessible because there isn't just that one chunk point to get to all the other 100 acres kind of to the north. So from that standpoint, there is, and I would anticipate that some people would voluntarily leave just because now there's much more visual that's on them from the highway or from people like service providers being out there. So we do have some people that are kind of out on the very fringe that I would anticipate they may not want to, but I think there's capacity, and at least for 50% to be able to move there without an issue, I would say yes.
I mean, so yeah, along the lines of making decisions here, Commissioner Chang, you mentioned supporting the fence partnership financially and driving over the irrigation infrastructure.
Yeah,
limiting that.
I wasn't putting that out as a motion,
Well,
but
he was trying to
take the
motion-
second
yeah.
and
Yeah, there you go.
and move ahead.
That's where I was going with it. I'm just saying, if we want to show of hands,
Yeah.
I don't know if we want to, put it in the minutes as a vote.
I think it's just good to see
Yeah.
that there's
But yeah,
support from both
I mean, I
bodies for
support that for those two items for sure. So yeah, there we go. We got that. And then, yeah, closure on this, we do have two options here, either committing to end of 26 or extending into 27. As I say, when I see that, it feels like another whole year for me, but whatever we want to do. Any thoughts on making a decision or?
I'd just like to make maybe a request and a suggestion. We don't have a plan. There's no plan, and no plan is going to be perfect because, there's a lot of unknowns and a lot of variability. But at least if we could identify some potential options for long-term vehicle areas, managed camps, more safe parking, and kind of start to put some dollar signs to that so we could communicate that to the public and understand ourselves and make better decisions. I'd kind of like to see that. I would be willing to entertain an extension of that end date, but not without a plan that says we know where we're headed to. Right now, it just feels like we're kind of like, as people are feeling good about leaving, we can transition, or we have a housing unit available, we can transition them out. It's like, well, I'd like to have a little bit more certainty around that. So that's how, we have staff here. I don't mean to put you on the spot. We talked about it once before, but how hard is it to kind of come up with a plan?
Can I just say, I think part of today too is just to hear from our county partners if there was appetite to explore extending beyond the date. And then I think to take your point, I would want to come back for another meeting early next year with some more details about that, what you just said. So I think we probably won't have all those answers today, but I think mostly today was to figure out kind of, are we stuck with that end date or not?
I was just going to add, we definitely thought a lot about it. I don't want to act like we're not here today. We haven't thought a lot about it. We have some numbers in mind, but I think the dollar values that go to that. We have to remember our ARPA is now expended, so we'd have to be looking for each body to sort of allocate their own funds. So I think the conversation is very much around the funding impact as well to what does that jurisdictions. But yeah, I'm be possible coming back with what does this kind of cost for us to do? Absolutely.
Just to talk about the visioning and what the plan looks like, I feel like Amy and Mayor Pro Tem Perkins has also talked about sort of the special sauce that we have in terms of the engagement that's going on with our population right now. And we've built a certain amount of momentum in those relationships. In fact, you even talked about it, about the 25%, 25%, 25%. If you start asking them or promising something that's not there. So in terms of the visioning that we go forward, I really want any solution that we come up with to be able to replicate that level of engagement, that level of service providing going on, such that we can continue to move folks positively towards further steps on the housing scale.
Are you thinking we went far enough on this or get more of a decision?
I would like to hear from the county partners. I think we have generally a majority on council that wants to look at extending. I think we want to know more of a plan of what that looks like, right? So I think we need to hear from our county partners if you're willing to look at that with us, given the kind of parameters that we've talked about of trying to find a solution as to where folks can go to so that we're not dispersing them.
I would really appreciate getting back together the 1st of January. Let's see.
Maybe not the 1st of January.
No,
but
first, but the
early next year.
January.
Yes, yeah.
Well, it depends on who's playing in the game.
Okay.
So anyway, we do have that situation here in the county. So I just think it would be, we should know what is really happening. We have a lot of service providers that are working out there. I'm surprised at some of their billing. It seems rather minuscule compared to 7 months worth of time. So I'm wondering, okay, what are you doing? You're not billing, and yet it's 7 months have gone by, and I really appreciate all the work they're doing. So I just, the first month of January. would
You'd be willing to
great.
come back
That
next year?
makes sense.
Okay. Tony?
So as I say, I don't know that I would want to step towards extending it because it kind of holds our feet to the fire, put a little bit of pressure on this situation. Let's find some locations. Let's do a long-term visitor area if possible. It's done on large swaths of public land down in Arizona and California. And we just happen to have some of that around here. So there's just big out of the box ideas that we need to try to look for. But I wouldn't start with the fact that we're going to slide a date just because we don't know where we're going to be next year. And we always could slide a date after the fact. Commissioner Chang?
Yeah, I'm comfortable. I would be comfortable now saying that we're going to extend the date. If we are serious about starting clearing activities in March, I think we would need to decide. We would need to make the decisions around that sooner than January. So I would encourage us to consider committing to an extension right now, and then also asking for by January, a menu of options more than a plan, I think, because we don't know enough about any of these options, and we don't know how, and none of them are certain enough to call them a plan at this point, but to understand what our options are and understand what's involved in developing those options, what resources we would need, what the timelines might be. I think we want to start doing that work as soon as possible so that we can coordinate our vision for when this is going to close or how much we're going to ramp it down with, a ramp up somewhere else, because otherwise we are casting tens or hundreds of people to the winds, and they're going to end up in unauthorized locations all over the community and cause great distress.
I agree, Phil. I just wanted to take a second to reiterate that how important the partnership is, not just from a logistical standpoint of, we need access here and people, have people on both lands, but it is, I think the message that the TSA sent to the public was that both the city and the county really cared about making this communal effort into finding a solution, a temporary solution for people that are living not only unhoused, but living out in the forest. And so I just, as we have these conversations, and if we meet again in January, which I hope we do, I just from my heart, and I think from the rest of the city council, like we really do want to collaborate together on this to continue to find some solution for people who are living in really harsh circumstances.
So Amy, is this 1.1 million, the total to go through December 31st of 26 then?
So the 1.3 was for the case management. Which slide are you talking about?
Well, I'm just looking at expenditures, the total award.
Oh, the total expenditures. So the TSSA for the case management, the housing center case management, that's that 1.3 of just the service provider totals. And I will add that they braid other funding sources, which is why it may look low, but they are investing those hours. Last month, it was 6 hours per on average for each of the people that they engaged.
Okay, but it was still only a portion of the people, right?
It was 94 people last
Right,
month.
90, and it wasn't important. It wasn't
Unique
150.
individuals out of, but that's out of 191, so that's,
Right.
yep.
Like how?
Just for that month.
Right.
So it's 241 overall. So people may have a job, and so there's just different opportunities and different times where people are out there. So their work is broad.
I just wanted to echo something or emphasize something for the community today. I think we're talking about closure beginning, at least based on the proposal that's presented to us today, to begin in May of next year, not necessarily in March. The notification would begin in March, right? So we meet the notification requirements.
Right.
So people are going to have a chance to be there through the winter time, through the most difficult part of the year. So just based on what Commissioner Chang said earlier, I think just to be clear, the closure wouldn't start until approximately May.
But one and
So
two
that would be in
would.
the one.
On areas on areas 1 and 2, right? We are, I think, my sense, I think you asked for this earlier, Mayor, was that we're generally in agreement about moving forward with that closure on those parts of the area of the TSSA, but it wouldn't begin until May of next year, with notice starting a bit earlier than that. And then people would have the opportunity to move to some of the other areas, or if they choose to leave, or ideally some of those folks are moving on to other housing options. It probably won't be all of the people who are forced to be displaced by that.
I think just from a staff perspective, we'd like to know before that date whether we're doing a full closure or not, just because that would be helpful for us to communicate, at least the March when we start noticing. So I think if coming back in January with a strategy and then coming, I think that can work for us, correct? But that would be helpful, I think, because most people out there want to know where they can go or where their options are. And if we are notifying their move, it's hard for them to move for a period of like 4 or 6 months and then have to move again. That also is a cost to us as well.
Looking in January for like a progress update and sort of what the timeline looks like on the areas that we've already talked about. So the opportunity in Redmond that's evolving, the Gales property, are there 1 or 2 others that might make some real sense and some legs? What does it look like to get to a place where we be able to have house people there, depending on the situation?
Yes.
Yes.
And in that kind of options analysis, if we could have a sort of generic one that's not attached to a specific property, but just says if we had 5 acres, it would cost us X to create X many sites, and then this much to have management and case management of the area. Something an abstract option that maybe could attach to a property at some point in time.
So when you have the example of the managed camp effort that's happening in the east side of Redmond, so that's more of a managed camp with a little bit more infrastructure. The other option is long-term visitor area, a little bit less services and infrastructure, but kind of low cost, long-term camping. So there's still something out there we haven't done yet that might be something.
I think I want to remember and remind though that one of the reasons this is really succeeding right now is because we are paying service providers to coordinate together to go out there a lot. And so whatever solution we do come to, I think we want to make sure we're remembering that we also are going to need fund services and service providers to go there if we are intending to transition people out of homelessness.
Yeah, that long-term visitor area in Quartzsite, Arizona, it sounded like
It's family first.
a big chunks of the population there were snowbirds and workforce. And we have I don't think we have many snowbirds in Juniper Ridge. We definitely have some workforce, but it's the populations don't exactly overlap. So we need to match the infrastructure. We need to match the the wraparound services with the actual population that we're working with. So I think that something like a long-term visitor area has a place here. I just don't, I wouldn't expect it to be the silver bullet that, 200 people will leave the TSSA and go to a long-term visitor area.
All right. Well, I think we've completed that item. I just want to say thank you to the county for willingness to keep talking about this and to consider extension. I came in here thinking closing next year without a plan was probably not a good idea, but with at least being able to talk about extending and thinking about creating more of a plan, I think that's a step in the right direction. So appreciate the discussion.
Okay, so Gail's property update, is that part?
I think we sort of wove that into the conversation,
Was
unless
that?
there's anything we missed.
I could give a short update. I've been in communication with Craig Gales and proposing that for him to come in and talk to the Board of County Commissioners about the proposal where $25,000 from the Crow budget would go to help pay for CDD fees. So I threw out a few dates to Craig Gales for him to come talk to the board. And then the possible board action would be for staff to draft some type of agreement, like a restrictive covenant, so that should he accept the funds, and the zoning is successful, that it's not used for commercial activity. He has had pre-app meeting with the Community Development Department.
Eric, I thought the agreement was being done with the Crow, not the county.
Well, the Crow is not a legal entity, so even though it's the Crow budget, those funds sit in a county budget.
My concerns about the Gales family having to come and negotiate everything about the rezone with the county is that the county is still the land use authority in this case. So I have already compromised myself by having some discussions with the Gales family. So like I will have, if this is a land use application that comes to us, I will have to recuse myself from consideration of that. But so as not to compromise the entire board, I'm wondering if this is the appropriate way to handle that process.
Are you saying that essentially the process is stalled? Nothing's happened on it besides?
No, not at all. The landowner has met with our community development department for a pre-app. So that's a land use process, and one likely outcome, should they submit an application, would be that it would go to a hearings officer instead of the Board of County Commissioners, because there has been public discussions among our commissioners about the application. So there's the land use piece, and then separately is the fees. The Crow Board has voted to allocate up to $25,000 from the Crow budget to help offset the costs associated with the planning and zoning fees. But the Crow also talked about that there would need to be some type of agreement that if they accept the funds, are successful in rezoning the property, that it would not be used for commercial purposes. So that's what I wanted to bring to the Board of County Commissioners is the agreement.
You're just going to bring us an agreement structure and say, does this work or not?
Yes, or say an agreement would look like these elements, and then the board action would be to direct staff to draft an agreement to bring back to the board, and also obviously the Gales would have to sign an agreement. It wouldn't take that long to draft an agreement.
My reaction to this is I'm very frustrated to hear there might be something else that's slowing the process down, which is just essentially what this sounds like to me. And so, I mean, I'm sorry to vent like that, but I thought this was moving forward and that they have, and the funds were going to them. And so this is the problem, right? Like we're just talking about having new places for people to go. So we need to move this as expeditiously as possible so that we get it finished, we get a decision, and ideally we can do something there. And it's just frustrating. I thought this had already moved.
This is my file from
So, I'm sorry, but-
2023, so if you think you're
So I
frustrated.
mean, the land, it's not just the state
Yeah,
use process,
knocking on
we
the
should do our own thing right here at the county level and the city level, like all of us, to move this stuff forward.
Yeah.
So
Mike, I mean, I also want you to know, I mean, the Gales family kind of grappling with that choice between, do they seek a rezone to rural commercial or rural residential? I mean, that it took them a long time to choose.
the fire needs to be lit underneath all of it.
Yes. Okay. Trash.
Trash. Solid waste,
Sorry, solid waste.
a county landfill inciting process, yeah. I called it garbage and trash earlier today too.
Garbage and
We were
trash.
talking about different things,
Yeah.
yeah.
Go again.
Good afternoon, evening, commissioners, council members. For the record, Tim Brownell, the Director of Solid Waste for Deschutes County. So yes, we are talking trash. So I want to give you a very brief update. I had a 32 slide presentation on the landfill siting process, but I'll spare you that. And just try and give you as brief an update as possible. So as you're aware, the county has been going through a process. We began it in 2022 by creating the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, which is made up of representatives from each of the city. So Cassie Lacey is a representative from the city of Bend, and we really appreciate her work and contributions. And some members, all of the two franchise haulers, and then members of the public, citizens at large. So they've helped us throughout this process, establishing the technical criteria by which we judge and evaluate potential sites that we then took to the board, and the board approved as the measure by which we assess different potential properties. We are looking for a site that's somewhere between 300 and 3,000 acres that will provide us with disposal disposal capacity for over 100 years to serve us many generations. As you're aware, we had gone through the process, winnowed down from 203 properties to 32 to 12 to 2, and then ultimately to 1 that was recommended to the Board of County Commissioners last year in June of 2024, July of 2024. That was the Moon Pit property, which is on the east side of the Badlands Wilderness area. It was an old aggregate mine, previously disturbed property. However, although we had a letter of intent, it wasn't binding, and the terms within that agreement had to be further fleshed out. And in the negotiations, we spent about 7 months trying to come to agreement with the owners of that property, and we were not able to. So at the direction of the Board of County Commissioners this March, we opened the process back up. We first went to them and discussed the potential of looking at out-of-county disposal or alternative technologies. We every 3 years, the department does a full assessment of those options. And based on the information provided, the board directed staff to reconvene the SWAC and look further at potential properties here in the county that it would be more cost effective, as well as continuing to take responsibility and control of our waste streams. So we did reconvene. And a couple things changed during this time. So over the year and a half from the previous recommendation, one was that the sage grouse habitat areas were redefined. The core habitat moved farther to the west. But general habitat and low density habitat moved a little bit farther to the east. Additionally, ODF and W did some further assessments of some of the wildlife overlays that were being provided that ruled out previous sites. And one in particular, which is we referred to as the Horse Ridge site. It's if you go out Highway 20 to the east, opposite the Badlands, on the other side of Highway 20 to the south side, there's 3 parcels, all of which are surface mines, disturbed properties. One owned by Hap Taylor, which is now Knife River, another owned by the Robinsons, and another owned by ODOT. Those are all adjacent to county property as well. So between the 4 parcels, we have over 400 acres of available property, all previously disturbed, all outside of sage grouse. And that property had been ruled out because of eagle overlays, bald eagle and in particular golden eagle overlays. And those have been further defined and pulled back so that that property, which had been ruled out previously, came back into consideration. So it's similar to the Moon Pit in that it is disturbed, significantly disturbed property. We have 3 property owners who are interested in selling. The one key difference of this property is that where Moon Pit was an aggregate mine in which it was predominantly basalt all the way down. So it was hard rock that would need to be excavated. Some of that has value, but it kind of depends on how close a project might be that needs aggregate at the time that you're excavating. The site on the that we call Horse Ridge is actually alluvial deposits, so it's sand and dirt, which will actually make the and that's unique for that entire area. It's kind of one specific pod. So from a landfill operations excavation standpoint, it's quite beneficial. If you're operating an aggregate mine, it doesn't have a whole lot of value other than embankment material or that sort of stuff. So it's quite promising. It opened, basically it opened up to us because of some revisions of some of the environmental overlays. So at our last meeting in August, the SWAC recommended to staff to do further what we call a final site evaluation. So it's a 6-month process of doing a significant deep dive into the financial, environmental, cultural aspects of the site to see if it is truly suitable for the use of as a future landfill. We then also have one other site, which is called the Roth East site, which has already gone through that process. It was the runner-up the last go round. It does have some concerns relative to its proximity to core sage grouse habitat, as well as its undisturbed EFU property. So there could be some challenges in the siting of that might be unique and different from previous aggregate mines. So to be continued. I get to come back to you again, probably in about 6 months, and tell you where we're at. We are hopeful to be able to have a recommendation that comes back to the board for their approval by April or so. The direction that we did get from the board, which we will make sure that comes to them and you're all aware of, is that we want to have executable agreements with both of the properties, if they're both deemed potential properties, that we have executable agreements with both of them pre-negotiated so that we know that we can move forward. The one other thing I will add is that when we started this process, we thought the Knott landfill would be at full capacity, reach capacity by April of 2029. That we've had a bit of a slowdown in solid waste disposal for the last 3 years compared to anticipated growth rates. So we're anticipating now that we have capacity at Knott landfill until 2031, somewhere between June and September of 2031. So doesn't necessarily mean that we have any more time. It just means we have a little bit more time. But so that's where we're at in the landfill siting process. So any questions or thoughts?
We had a work session today earlier about the franchise agreement stuff, so we'll be working on that. So we're just kind of up in the air, but by putting it on the agenda and starting the discussion, it'll be something we talk about. So that's coming still.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'd actually like to ask a little bit more about that. So the city is working on its own franchise agreement. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I think we're wanting to coordinate very closely with the county and sort of letting the county take the lead. as we agree with the idea of all the franchise agreements for solid waste being held by the landfill and solid waste provider. So I think that's sort of been the interplay. And we've been waiting on some negotiations and just to hear kind of the latest update, so.
Yeah, and so I guess the one brief update on that is what we were trying to do was negotiate voluntary agreements with both the haulers, and we are not able to get into agreement with both. So really, we started our discussions with the board around how might we want to move forward on addressing this.
So it's the same thing yours does as far as how the haulers behave and how they can be held accountable.
Well, during the board discussion today, there was, we ended up with a big question mark about whether we're moving forward with termination of the current arrangement so that we can move to a franchise agreement, because the voluntary negotiations with the haulers fell through. So if the city's desire is to coordinate with us on moving forward with that kind of a franchise agreement, on our end, there's a question mark right now.
I think we were waiting to hear how that went today, so it's brand new information for us to digest as well.
Yeah.
If you're considering termination.
So
We haven't had a chance to get briefed on it or discuss it
Right,
yet, so
right.
we'll be able to talk about it later, I think.
You're
Yeah.
suggesting that's something that maybe we should be talking about?
If you may want to give us input if you'd like us to move in certain directions, because basically today kind of movement in that moving in the direction toward those modern franchise agreements, I felt like fizzled. So
Take a look.
Well, yeah, we'll watch the meeting and determine how to get involved. Thanks.
thank you.
There you go. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you all.
Go ahead and introduce the next one.
Oh, yeah, next we have a work session from city staff on sequential review for urban growth boundary updates.
Sequential review. It's got something to do with urban growth expansion.
It does. I can tell this is your favorite subject. Yeah. So while Damien gets the presentation pulled up here, I'll just start us out for the sake of time. I'm Brian Rankin. I manage long-range planning at the city. Damien Cernick, he's a senior planner in the growth management division. And we're here to talk to you about two things, really. Give you an update, a briefing, pretty short and sweet on the upcoming growth plan. And so we'll provide some information there and spend a little bit more time talking about what's called sequential review. And sequential review is essentially a process afforded by law to do the same work that we would otherwise do in a traditional growth planning process. But it's a way to take the approval process and break it into steps. So in essence, very simply, you can do all the work all at once. And it's what we're saying, all the work, a bunch of different ordinances that our city council would have to pass, our housing land need, our employment land need, efficiency measures that change things in the land entitlement inside the urban growth boundary, and a UGB expansion. You could do all that work all at once and have those approvals and send it all off to the state all at once as one package. Or you can do what we're recommending and hoping for the board's blessing and approval of this, is to say, no, well, let's do this in two phases. We're gonna do some of that work, especially on land need, and figure out what we need first. Get that approved locally here by the city council and ship that off to the state. And then the state gets a chance to tell us if did we get it right? And to get that approved before moving to the next step. And the next step is then figuring out what you do with that land need. So we'll brief you on more of this tonight. But essentially it's to ask for the board's approval, participation, and partnership in working with the city council to do this. So this is essentially a work session for both entities on this. And if you say, this sounds like a good idea, we like it, then we'll move forward with individual actions from the city council first, and then working with the Board of County Commissioners next. So that was a long introduction, but I think we're up and flying. So
Well, yeah, sense of place then, because as I say, I just happen to be they had the history of doing the urban growth expansion adoption process many years ago now. In fact, what comes to mind is the Simpson property with the landfill, how that was part internal to the city, part of kind of the rezoning, and now there's apartments out there on the was it west or north side of the road, whatever that is. So our urban growth expansion efforts from years ago, and now it's time for the next round, huh?
Yep. So I'll brief you really fast here. Let's go to the next slide here. So 20-year growth plan. Let's jump in. So as Commissioner DeBonne mentioned, he was part of I forget. It's been so long now. The steering committee. Yeah, it was our UGB steering committee. It was a joint effort between the city of Bend and the county to complete our last major update of our comprehensive plan, which resulted in a UGB expansion at that time, about 2,380 acres. And we are now in a position where we need to update that. But our current plan really kind of ends up to 2028, technically speaking. Our planning period ends in 2028. So we are proposing to start that work again. The current plan has a clear vision. It's to, when you expand your urban growth boundary, to form complete communities, which is a mix of land uses, parks, schools, a variety of housing, and employment mixed together to provide that complete community experience in those expansion areas, and then also to grow up in certain areas of town, particularly in the core areas. So it's a little redevelopment, it's a little bit of expansion. That's kind of a hybrid strategy. And we have other plans that have essentially now come up to speed with trying to allow that land use pattern to emerge over time. So we have a multimodal transportation systems plan that's focusing on all forms of transportation, really catching up with bicycle and pedestrian and transit infrastructure, walking, biking, and rolling around. And then we have been focusing a lot on housing production, variety, choice through our major planning efforts in long-range planning, as well as through development code updates. And economic development was a big part of our 2016 package, where we expanded for almost as much employment land back in 2016 as we did for residential land. And we are continuing that effort currently with an economic development strategy that's taking shape now. And we have done many different kinds of plans for our infrastructure, water, sewer, to make sure that whatever we're planning for our land use, we're expanding our UGB, or we're becoming more dense, that we have adequate infrastructure for that. So here we are, where it's about to be 2026, and we have 2 years left on this plan. And I think we are all well aware, as your previous discussion suggested, we have a housing crisis. Land supply is an issue for certain kinds of uses in Bend. So we are planning to do something very similar to what we did in 2016, with some exceptions I'll talk about. But there are two pathways for this to take place. One is what we did in 2016, which is let's adopt all these things together. And another is to use a law cited here, ORS 197-6263, that says, you know what, you can ask the Department of Land Conservation and Development to essentially approve certain elements, especially the elements that come first in the work, because it's kind of linear work, to approve those first. And once you get those acknowledged and approved, then you move forward to the next stages. And so that's what we're here asking for tonight, here to answer your questions, and hopefully at the end of the day, see, it's a good idea, and let's move forward with this. This is somewhat new in Oregon. City of McMinnville has used this successfully. There's some other cities that are also moving in that direction. And interestingly enough, many of the rules that are being promulgated and about to be adopted soon are now taking this same concept and trying to bake it into state law more and more. So this isn't a crazy idea. This is something communities are using, and the state itself is moving in that direction. Let's get to our next slide. And this gets to our this is one of the reasons why the sequential review process, at least we think it's a good idea, is that there are really major new rules and regulations in play that affect this work. First, the climate-friendly and equitable communities. You'll hear the acronym CFEC. And that's a whole new set of rules that pertain to transportation
planning. Many of those actually have to do with land use. So it's both land use and transportation planning. And part of these requirements will be to designate what are called climate-friendly areas, which are more dense kind of redevelopment areas that we designate inside the existing UGB, where people can essentially live, work, play without having the automobile be their one and only source of the way of getting around in these areas. So to be more walkable, bikeable, and more serviced by transit. And then, of course, all of this, these rules were promulgated to reach climate goals that the state has adopted at the state level. And so we're looking at doing that primarily through land use and transportation. The Oregon Housing Needs Analysis, or ONA, is a set of rules it's a set of rules that are about to be adopted. I think, Damien, when are they going live? They're going live this week, aren't they?
They are being released this Wednesday, October 1st, and in advance of a hearing before the Land Conservation. Let me try that again. So I'm picking up now. So the rules are going to be released on October 1st through the Secretary of State's office. And the Land Conservation and Development Commission will be holding a public hearing on them on October 23rd. Public comment is going to be open until November 7th. And then the commission is expected to adopt the final version at their December meeting.
These are big rules. These are big changes in how we're planning, cities across Oregon are planning for housing. And I think the biggest structural change is that the state of Oregon is now saying to cities like Bend, here are the number of dwelling units that you need to plan for. In Bend's case, it's around 32,000 dwelling units. You need to plan for this many units and at different levels of affordability. And also they're giving the city housing production targets. So it's a brand new set of laws. It's a brand new set of rules. And with brand new rules comes a bit of uncertainty. So some of the work that we're doing here in the sequential review process, we're going to address many of these new rules kind of at the outset of the project. So I know also we'll be one of the first communities that are using the new rules. So as you can imagine, there's a little bit of uncertainty in using new rules for a very large, complex, and often controversial process. So we want to make sure we get that right before we go on and do all the other work that's dependent upon that. Next slide, please. This is a graphic that is kind of illustrating as simply as possible. I know it's a little busy, but it's as simple as possible to kind of explain the totality of the work that the city of Bend is going to be doing starting next year and up till 2029 and 2030. So they're essentially throughout the entirety of the process, we want to do a great job trying to do community engagement and really engaging with people that historically just have not been well engaged by the city in land use and transportation planning a little bit. Go out on the street and not require people come to the boardroom, kind of spirit with that. We have our first package of work, essentially all those different items you see there. And I don't want to bore you for the sake of time here, is that's determining our land need. How much land do we need for employment? How much do we need for housing? And what's our capacity? So that's the first stage of work. The second package is really saying, what are we going to do about that? We anticipate that we will have a residual land need. So in other words, our current urban growth boundary is not likely to accommodate all of our land needs for the next 20 years up to the year 2050. So we actually start to resolve that. Where do we look at upzoning and redevelopment? Where do we look at urban expansion? Where are those UGB expansion areas going to be? And ultimately adopting a UGB expansion. Once we get that done, for us to then focus purely on the transportation systems plan where we can cover those brand new climate-friendly and equitable communities rules. Next slide, please. I'm going to turn it over to Damien. He'll talk to you about the sequential review elements. Luckily for the county, your participation in this is really related to adopting the urban growth boundary expansion. So you don't have to worry about all the things that the city is going to have to adopt. It's really on the UGB expansion where we will need your participation. So Damien, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everybody. So as Brian laid out, we've got roughly 3 packages of work that we're going to be doing as part of our growth plan update. The first one I want to talk about here is package 1, which we'll be working on roughly between second quarter of 26 and third quarter of 27. And as Brian mentioned, this is going to be focusing on land need. So the 3 deliverables that are part of this package will include our actual inventory of buildable lands, where we'll actually look at all of our land that's been designated for housing and employment and see what we have, what our capacity is. We'll start with phase one of our housing capacity analysis. We're actually looking to see what we can accommodate in the urban growth boundary with respect to housing. And then a similar element as part of this package will be our economic opportunities analysis, where we actually look at our supply of employment land, look at our need for sites over the next 20 years, and then see what that translates into for a land need. As Brian mentioned, these are all products that will need to be adopted by the City Council. Those will be adopted as amendments to our comprehensive plan, but there's no action required by the county board with respect to these elements. The second package, package 2, is one that we would start somewhat concurrently with the work we're doing on package 1. This would start in early 2027 with the goal of wrapping up in early 2029. This includes phase 2 of our housing capacity analysis. We spent some time using new owner rules to see to what extent we can accommodate our need for housing in the current boundary. Our next deliverable will include our work on identifying climate-friendly areas. At the same time, we'll look at efficiency measures. What that's going to mean in terms of this product is looking to see what kind of changes we can make inside the urban growth boundary to provide more capacity for housing, but also for employment. And then that final element will be the actual UGB amendment, which will include changes to our plan map, our zoning map, but also our comprehensive plan. These are all changes that we need the City Council to also adopt as part of our package. The only action we would ask from the county board is the adoption of the UGB amendment. And that's in part because state law requires that any UGB amendment has to be adopted by both the city and the county. One of the pieces that goes along with the sequential review process is giving notice to the Department of Land Conservation and Development that we intend to use it. We do have Angie Brewer and Kevin Young with DLCD on the Zoom call tonight. If you have any questions. The written notice is not outlined in state rules regarding sequential review. So what I'm about to share with you is really kind of based on our review of what City of McMill did with Yamhill County. They prepared a 2-page document that outlined how they satisfied all the criteria to use sequential review. The key one is looking at a UGB expansion that's likely more than 50 acres. We're going to propose a planning period as part of this notice of 2029 to 2049. And then with that notice, we would have a work plan that covers all the packages and deliverables that we'd be completing between 26 and 29. With respect to what McMinnville and Yamhill County did, they had each governing body designate someone to sign on their behalf. I think in their case, they designated the CDD director, but that surely could be city manager and county administrator or the chair and the mayor, depending on your choice. So as Brian mentioned in the beginning, one of the key advantages we're trying to gain with using this sequential process is getting products approved as we go. With really the primary goal of getting our land need approved so that by the time we get to the debates about growing up or growing out or some combination, everybody's on the same page regarding our land need. There's also the uncertainty of dealing with new state rules regarding housing and transportation that may require some more work on our part to make sure that we've hit all the marks with the state. One of the risks we have to face with using this kind of approach is that there may be some time added to review of that first package. If there is a remand, we've got to address some technical issues, or if there's an appeal where one of the parties wants to have the Land Conservation and Development Commission hold a hearing on it. So time may be a factor here, but it also gives us an opportunity to still kind of get those first three products approved so that by the time we get to the how we meet our needs discussion, that's already been settled. So what we recommend as sort of our next few steps, if the City Council and the board agree, is we'd finish our work program for the planning period. We would go to the City Council on November 19th with a resolution that we'd ask the council to approve, directing staff to work with the county to put this into effect. Once the council approved that resolution, we'd be going with the county staff and coordinating with them on a date with the board and asking the board to approve an order, essentially doing the same, directing county staff to work with us to put this into effect. And then we would submit our proposal to the department for their review in December. And once we do that, they have 120 days within which to review, ask questions, maybe look at potential changes, and then review our sequential review work program. And just to kind of recap, before taking questions, package 1 would include our land need elements, where we're looking at how much land we have and how much we might need going forward for our growth plan. And then package 2 would be how we meet that need through changes we made to the comprehensive plan and the zoning code to look at providing capacity inside, but also looking at some kind of amendment to the UGB. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, just a friendly amendment to this, because our city council, they have reviewed a number of these slides, and you'll look at this and you'll go, wait, there's some stuff that's missing on here. You cannot, everything that the city has to do in terms of this whole work plan, some of those elements can't be in the sequential review process. So the city council, for example, will be asked to do a housing production strategy as part of package 2. However, that is not to be included in sequential reviews. So you're still going to do the work, you're still going to adopt it, you'll adopt it separate, and we'll send it to DLCD for their review at the same time. But so when you look at this list, if you're an astute observer of land use acronyms, you will see, okay, there's some stuff missing. We're still going to do the work. It's just not included in the sequential review proposal, because that process is only applicable to some of the elements of the total work plan, if that makes sense.
And we are now ready to answer any questions you have.
Questions, thoughts? Oh, please.
So I assume some of those things are not in there because they need to be sufficiently independent of a sequential process. So if there was something like, my question is about what other indices are there within the sequential process. So for example, if the city says we have a goal of building a lot of homes in the core area, well, that's going to have implications for some of the other aspects of growth plan, whether it's transportation or sewage or water. Are there interdependencies like that would be implicated in sequential growth that, once we say, well, we already made this decision early on in sequential growth process, now we're already on this track? Or can you go back and revise stuff, or how does that work?
You can go back and revise if you want to. It would be a separate action. But to your point, that's why we're proposing to do the work in these packages that make sense to address the interdependencies. And from our perspective as staff, and I think even the legal perspective here, is that the first package, it's really about the first package of amendments. So we're doing our buildable lands inventory, we're doing phase 1 of our housing capacity work, and we're doing our employment opportunities analysis. So when you look at that, those are fairly independent, to be honest, because each one of those documents is essentially saying, here's what you need. You need this much for housing, you need this much land in this many sites for employment, and this is your capacity. So it's really I think to staff, it's really important to get that done. And once you're done there, I think in the phase 2 work, all these things come into play and you can work through those interdependencies. So it will be rich with interdependencies, but I don't believe the sequential review process in any way complicates it. And if a complication occurs, we just go, okay, cool. We want to change something. Let's change it. And we just do that through a separate ordinance.
And if I could add just real briefly, the sequential review process is just the review process that we engage with the state. So the laws and rules that we have to satisfy aren't changing. It's really just a matter of, instead of giving everything to the state at one time and saying, here's our entire package, all 20,000 pages, we're gonna give you 10,000 now and then give you the rest later. And that's using a metaphor.
If you didn't do this, if you went with the whole enchilada kind of standard scenario, is it possible that the state is reviewing your submittal and says, oh, your housing needs analysis portion of this package is off, is substantially off, and you need to go back and fix that before we want to look at the rest of this stuff? Or because that's off, you're not producing housing to the right need in the first place, and so go back to basically phase 1 and start redoing it from there.
You're correct. Yes, so that is one of the advantages. And why would a community seek out sequential review? It's because if you do everything all at once, because this is almost, let's be honest, it's a bit like this is a house of cards, right? So you have the house of cards, all these assumptions are made and all the work is done, and all the assumptions are made and all the work is done. If you package all this up together, with a house of cards, you just pull like the bottom card out, and all the other work that's dependent upon that can fall. So, for example, let's say we make assumptions in some of our prior work on a buildable lands inventory where we over-assumed our capacity or under-assumed our capacity. Let's just keep it simple. Say we under-assume our capacity, and somebody fights us on that. After we've done our urban growth boundary expansion, you have to redo your UGB expansion work again.
Isn't that what happened last time?
That did happen last time. Yeah, that happened last time in the remand. So when the city did this work, gosh, it was adopted in 2009?
2009, and we got a
2009.
remand order in 2010.
Yeah, and it was a 150-page remand order that said, okay, go back and redo this, go and redo this, redo this, redo this, redo this, redo. So you were starting over in a lot of cases. So what this allows the city to do, and the county as well, is when you get that work done, it's the same legal recourse. Go ahead. If we get something wrong, we'll find out, either from the state or an appellant or an objector. But once you get it right, you say, okay, now we can spend the money and the time and the effort, both political effort, the work of people who are participating in this, to do the more, I would say, even controversial work, which is really around the urban growth boundary expansion and around where you're looking at upzones, rezones, and redevelopment. So
you get to shellac your first
yes.
layer of your house of cards.
Super glue.
before you
Yeah,
put the second.
you super glue that. Okay, that's good. Now set the second up, and then once the LCD says you're done, everything is super glued.
Any more metaphors anyone wants to?
All set? So the city of Benton's still growing. Is that the bottom line here?
We're still growing.
That's it. Yep.
Yeah.
Get support for moving forward.
Oh, yeah. So as I say, this is a moment for us to acknowledge it's coming for the end of this year to be signed on, to be applied for LCDC or DLCD.
All right, great. Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else this evening? Are you used to getting out of a meeting before sunset?
No.
Not usually. Thank you for your service, though, for the community.
Thank you. Thanks for meeting. See you
Okay.
soon.
All set. Meeting adjourned.